Na 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 Bateater. Hello everyone, Bront, CatHerder here. We're having some fun talking Raid Shadow Legends, and we are here on my main account to talk about the Bateater clan boss team. This is another unkillable clan boss team, and it's honestly one of my favorites. It's one that's certainly not seen as much use of late, because people either like the Wixwell comps, which are generally kind of easy to build, or the Myth Air or the Myth Fu, which are maybe slightly easier to build because they involve rares and a few different epics that aren't all voids. Obviously, you still do need a Mytha. The Bateater does require 2 Maneaters, which is part of its claim to fame, and it is one of the oldies but goodies, and I really like this comp overall. Now, it doesn't do quite as much damage as the Myth Air, but it still does plenty enough to 1-key Ultra Nightmare. So let's go take a look at the Bateater. So if we hop on DeadwoodJedi.com, we can see that the Bateater does indeed use 2 Maneaters, a Seeker, and a Painkeeper, as well as a flexible DPS. Now, Maneater and Seeker is where the Bateater name comes from. It's definitely kind of fun to make fun of with the Batman type thing, but you know what? That's all what these raid names are, and a lot of these clan boss names are kind of funny and tongue-in-cheek, so definitely enjoy it. You do definitely need these 4 champions. They are not really negotiable. There are versions of this that don't always use Seeker. I think there are versions of this that actually don't. I'm very sure there's not a version of this that doesn't use Painkeeper. You need Painkeeper for the Maneater reset. Not having a Seeker, there may be a version of this. It's certainly going to be a lot harder to do, but I'm sure there is one if you need to. The difference is Seeker has got a good turn meter boost on a 2-turn cooldown effectively because of how his kit works. We can certainly talk about that a little bit. Whereas the Maneaters give you both the block debuffs and the unkillable to both never die and never get stunned or take any other debuffs. So this is a 100% affinity friendly team with no additional tuning whatsoever. I also like it because see the speeds right here, there's a very wide range of speeds. Specifically, like this first Maneater here can be anything from 265 to 285. This Maneater has about range of about 8 speed. Seeker's got a range of about 8 speed. Painkeeper's got a range of about 8 speed. Your DPS has got a range of about 9 speed. I love this because it gives you a wide target area to fit in your build. So you can kind of aim for the middle, and there's enough wiggle room that any of these champions can wiggle one direction or the other, and this team still works. So it makes it very easy to build. It's one of the easiest clan boss teams to build because for the most part, it is gearing champions, setting it up, and making sure they don't have any of the masteries that can cause problems. So what other considerations are there? Well, you certainly need to be aware if you're going to use somebody like Ninja or you're going to use somebody like a Jintaro. So those are certainly options. You do need to get specific tunes for them. They're not listed in here. You actually have to find the Bateater with Ninja or the Bateater with Jintaro. There are separate mentioned builds because everybody's speed is a little bit different. You do have to be careful because Painkeeper actually has turn meter boost on her A1. So you need to make sure that Painkeeper cannot counterattack in any way, shape, or form. It basically means there's certain masteries that are off limits for her, as well as you can't give her any sort of retaliation gear. On the other hand, you can certainly give all that gear to Maneaters and Seekers, and of course your DPS. The other fun thing about this team is since your DPS doesn't have any buffs on them when they take their turns, they can repeatedly take turn after turn after turn after turn. So champions that are in Relentless or champions that get extra turns work fine as DPSs. So you can use a Dracomorph in Relentless, for example. You can use a Ninja in Relentless, although again, you do to tune it slightly differently for a Ninja. You could use basically anybody in Relentless. You could use a Turvold, for example, and he would work just fine, although Turvold gets more damage from buffs. Therefore, this is probably not the best team for him, but Turvold works in some of these competitions, making him very good to use for a damage dealer in Clan Boss. So all kinds of DPS options here. So you can go with something that's an affinity issue. So you could go with the Void if you wanted to. All kinds of fun options here. And honestly, as long as you have a DPS that does good enough damage, ideally brings either poisons, or maybe you throw poison set on like a Seeker, or even a Painkeeper, like a Toxic set, bring some burns maybe. You're certainly going to want decreased defense and or weaken if you can. They certainly will help you. You can do a 1-key clan boss team with a Bateater very, very easily. So let's go take a look at my team. We'll talk about a couple of other good DPS champions that we could put in there and see what I've got them built. All right, so first of all, we've got the dual Maneaters here. One of them is going to be faster than the other one, so I've got one of them labeled with the speed and I've got one of them labeled with the attack. Now it turns off after building them and improving them and spending some time working on this to get this to a 1-key. I'm pretty sure my fast one actually ends up doing a little more damage. Not necessarily, because you can see I've got a lot more crit damage here on my attack one than I do on the speed one here. But if we look at his total stats, I do not have any area bonuses. To be fair, I didn't actually have any area bonuses with this anyway. I do have the +2 ignore defense, just because I could, wasn't really needed. But I do not have any other really significant improvements on the Demon Lord because I was already 1-keying it by the time those came around. So I didn't need to make any major improvements. The other thing I have chosen to not do is I have not really empowered my clan boss team much because I don't want to necessarily mess with the speeds if I don't have to. Their gear is good enough to get me a 1-key with a lot of extra headroom, and it doesn't need to be better once it's done. So we look here at this Maneater. He's got 4.3k attack. He's at 267 speed. Now the good news is I could certainly empower this Maneater without causing a problem because this is the fast Maneater. So he can go all the way up to 285 without really affecting his speed. So with that in mind, I may end up just empowering him anyway, so it's not a big deal. You know, does decent damage here. This is not an amazing build, and I will tell you that the low accuracy is actually good on a Maneater because he will put up decrease attack, but you don't need decrease attack, so he doesn't need the accuracy in clan boss. On the other hand, Maneater is a great champion outside of clan boss as well, so you may want the accuracy anyway so that he can do the A2 turn meter steal and then the A3 decrease attack as well. Those can be very helpful for you as well. So if you're doing enough damage or more than enough damage, throwing an accuracy banner on him and letting him be is probably a good strategy. Same with the other Maneater here. Now this is the slower Maneater, so he is going to be 243. He's got about the same attack, but he's got a lot more crit damage, so he's going to be hitting a bit harder. Basically, I believe he has got a, let's go to there, he has got a crit damage glove, whereas this one here, bring that to my collection, he's only got crit rate because I wanted to get him faster. Now, my account now, I could probably fit him with crit rate or crit damage gloves without too much of a problem. But if you can't, just get him the crit rate gloves. Maneaters do a ton of damage. They actually hit fairly hard. So building them for damage is a good way to help increase the damage on your team. As far as masteries are concerned, they both have the same set of masteries here. Because they are in an unkillable team and are taking damage, Grim Resolve is great on them because they will be taking damage. They will be less than 50% HP. So this means that they will generally do more damage as soon as the clan boss goes on further. So it's at 5% extra damage, but you know what? 5% damage is extra damage. If this was a block damage team, I would instead probably go Heart of Glory because that will tend to keep people at 100%, meaning that this is going to do extra damage instead. Life Drinker, probably not needed, but certainly doesn't hurt for other PvE content. War Master really is kind of the star of the show here. We don't mind Retribution for additional damage. Nobody is ever getting stunned, so Deterrence doesn't actually help in this particular build. If you have a Stun and Cleanse build, on the other hand, Deterrent can actually work very well. So here is my Seeker here. He is the fast Seeker because he does need to be particularly fast. We have him here at a 259 speed. I've got a ton of crit damage here. He's got a good attack. He does not have a lot of accuracy because the only debuff he can land is Provoke, and I don't need him for Provoke anywhere in the game. If I did need him for that Provoke, for example, if I was going to use him as a Provoker for, say, a Hydra team, which is a perfectly valid option for him, then I would certainly build him with some of that accuracy and probably drop down his other stats just a little bit by putting an accuracy banner on instead of this attack banner I've got right here. He does have crit rate. Well, he's got crit rate gloves on there. That's actually pretty impressive. I got that much crit damage on him. But overall, he's got a ton of crit damage. That's right. He also has a 6-star blessing. So if we go over here, I've got him built with Phantom Touch. I could certainly argue instead of Phantom Touch, it might not be a bad idea to have Cruelty, but generally what you're going to want is you're going to want Cruelty on one of your champions, and you're going to want Phantom Touch or other damage things on everyone else, because you want the extra damage. That's definitely helpful. Cruelty, however, is going to increase the amount of damage you do overall by whittling down the boss's defense, but to be fair with Clan Boss, the Clan Boss defense is not as high as other bosses, so having this extra attack on Seeker where he is Phantom Touch the second time gives him a 100% chance of always getting the extra damage and a 35% chance of doing a second instance of that damage. So for Seeker, that's actually a pretty huge damage boost because he is always attacking every time he gets a turn. The only time he's not is when he does his increased speed, but he then takes another turn, which then means he's attacking. So he's basically attacking every time he gets an action of some kind. Again, as far as masteries are concerned, he doesn't necessarily need this deterrence, but again, it works if he's going to have a cleansing team. It didn't really make much of a difference because Killstreak is not going to make any difference for him either way in this Clan Boss team either. If you're looking to min-max him and use him other areas, maybe Killstreak might have been better overall. War Master is definitely the mastery to go for Clan Boss. There's no reason to ignore extra defense against the Clan Boss. It certainly can help do a little bit of damage, but it's not there. For the most part, these are probably the masters you're going to find on almost everybody on these Clan Boss teams. So this is the Painkeeper build here. As you can see here, we've got 242 speed. I've got some decent crit damage. Painkeeper does not do a ton of damage, so maxing out Painkeeper for damage is probably not the best thing as far as adding damage to your team. She's probably the last champion to build for damage. That said, you give her good HP, decent attack, and decent damage. She'll be useful in other areas of the game for that additional damage. Plus, the extra HP helps her heal because she actually does have a heal on her A2. Painkeeper is used in this team because of her A3. Decrease the cooldown of all ally skills by 1 turn. So what this does is this gives her, basically allows her to make the Maneaters on a 4-turn cooldown. So what happens is one Maneater has his, they're going 2 turns every time the Clan Boss takes a turn. One Maneater is going, then another Maneater is going, and they're staggering their block debuffs and they're staggering their unkillable so that one of those two always has it up on every champion. And this is partially how you do it, because otherwise it's a 5-turn cooldown, which is a little harder to navigate without a Painkeeper. And as you can see here, you can't see behind me, but she has War Master on for the masteries, but and then again, those are pretty much the standard you've seen on every other champion so far. In the support tree, we have gone down this road right here. She doesn't have any buffs, so lasting gifts doesn't make a lot of sense. She does a chunk of healing, and that's very good in other areas of the game, so I have gone down the healing tree here to give her additional healing. You absolutely cannot do Cycle of Magic because you need to count on her teams, her skills going exactly at the right time. So we went here with Spirit Haste. Not really going to help in Clan Boss, might be helpful otherwise, but that is a Painkeeper in a nutshell. And finally here we have the ever popular Dracomorph. Dracomorph is one of the best damage dealers for Clan Boss overall. He does decreased defense, he does weaken, he does poisons, and he has a very hard-hitting A1 that scales up with the amount of debuffs on the boss. So very, very good champion in general. He's actually really useful in a lot of content, although he's certainly been power crept quite a bit. But you get a Dracomorph, and it's kind of nice to be able to use him in a lot of areas in the game. And the fact that he has got a 224 speed means he's usable in every area of the game for most accounts that are going to still need him in every area of the game. Now, it's certainly not going to be an end game. This is going to be an amazing Hydra Dracomorph, but he's usable there early on for progression, and eventually when you no longer need him, he's still in your Clan Boss team, he's still this fast, very, very good champion. Got him built with a bunch of attack, the 224 speeds on the upper range of what I'm allowed to do with him, 242 crit damage, helps a ton with him doing extra damage, enough accuracy to land his debuffs. He's got more accuracy than he needs, but a lot of that comes from the fact that I've got the Faction Guardians, and the affinity bonuses have slowly but surely climbed up and gotten better over time. So a lot of it is just how my account has changed versus where I initially built him. The other thing that is definitely important to note is here on the blessings, we've got Brimstone. Brimstone lets him put Smite up, and Smite can add 5 to 10 million damage to your team, especially if he is attacking twice in most cases to do that damage. Other champions you certainly could use instead is you don't have to use a Dracomorph. Jintoro works fine. Ninja works just fine. You do have to build specific teams for them because they're a little bit harder to build, but you can do that. Thane actually can mostly do what Dracomorph does. She does the decreased defense, she does the weaken, she does poisons, and I think she even doesn't decrease attack. She is a very good champion. She is a little bit harder to build than Dracomorph, but for an unkillable team, it's not a huge problem because you don't care about whether or not she is squishy. The other thing that she does not bring is she does not bring Brimstone, which is kind of where Dracomorph kind of shines. But she is a very good champion. You could certainly one key with a Feign with the right gear. It may just be slightly more gear intensive than a Dracomorph, for example. But there are plenty of champions you could use to one key in this team, and because these DPS champions are going to be fast, they are still usable in other content in the game for a long time, which makes this honestly one of my favorite teams to build. Finally, here in the masteries, not a big difference here. We've got the Cycle of Violence, which has a chance of decreasing the cooldown. Doesn't matter in Clan Boss because you're not going to be hitting that hard, but made sense for the character otherwise. Everything else here is pretty standard. He needs the accuracy, so we went down with the additional accuracy. Lore of Steel gave him some additional stats from some of the sets that he's got on right now. I certainly wouldn't be the worst thing to go with Cycle of Magic instead, because that would work just fine. However, I liked Master Hexer, which gets the decreased defense and the weaken, and some poisons lasting just a little bit longer. And I think overall that's going to add more damage to the team. Now, Dracomorph is great because Dracomorph can throw up 4 poisons with this, and they're guaranteed. Plus, he places this decreased defense and weaken. Part of the reason he is such a good damage dealer is, yes, he only places these things and doesn't actually attack when he does them, but because he places them, he's not going to weak hit. So you do not have a 30% chance of not landing these when you are facing the Force champion. So he is more affinity friendly than most Magic champions and most champions in general in Clan Boss because of that. And that means that your damage doesn't drop off anywhere near as much when you're talking about Force. So how do you set up a Bateater? Well, it's generally pretty simple. Now, Dracomorph is in the lead because he's got the only aura that actually affects this, and it's an increased accuracy aura. So if I didn't need as much accuracy on him, I could build him for a lot more damage because I could build him with, I think it's a 40 or 60 point accuracy aura. So I could build him with less accuracy, still have enough accuracy to land debuffs, and get extra damage out of him. If I'm struggling to build the team, or I'm struggling to get that one key, I absolutely would do that. It's no longer worth it for me to go back and do that, but it's certainly an option. But for him, because the way that the AI works with decreased defense and weaken, if I don't prioritize these as the #1 skill, he will not place these if the boss already has them up there. And you might think that's a good thing, but what happens is then everyone else will attack and do other debuffs possibly, or just do damage without the decreased defense and weaken, which lowers everybody else's damage for several hits before Dracomorph comes back and lands these things. Plus, if you don't prioritize them properly, for example, he may do the Poison Jaws, fill up the debuff bar, and then you can't actually land the additional decreased defense and weaken, which would certainly hurt your damage a lot more. So you do have to prioritize this with a Dracomorph. With other champions, you may not necessarily have to, but the decreased defense and weaken are probably the 2 most important debuffs to get on the boss to add damage from everybody else. So I generally, on any DPS you can, suggest you prioritize getting decreased defense and weaken out as early as possible before you go for any other debuffs. And that includes champions that might do it on an A1. Maybe you might A1 first, or maybe you won't because their A2 or A3 might have the weaken and the decreased defense is on the A1. There's a couple champions like that that are actually good for some of these teams. So that was just make sure you get your priorities straight with your DPS. In some cases, like a ninja, for example, your DPS, these are super important because you need him to be doing these things in a very specific order because of turn meter boosting and other skill resets that can happen as well. Maneater, we've got the fast Maneater here. He is going to lead off with the Ancient Blood, which is the unkillable and block debuffs. And then we generally have that as the first priority. Because this is on a 5-turn cooldown and this is on a 3-turn cooldown, they are interspersed enough where if you put this as the #1 skill, he will occasionally do this instead of Ancient Blood, and that can ruin the run. So you have to be careful with that setup. Same with this particular Maneater as well, except for you'll see we've led off with his A2. You could in theory lead off with his A1 instead of his A2 if you really wanted to. It doesn't really matter, so I figured I might as well get the additional damage because this hits just a little bit harder than his A1. It's actually a really good skill as well. This drains turn meter of target foes, so that is part of the reason accuracy on him is very, very good for non-clan boss pay tough. And again, he does do the decrease attack for 1 turn on that A1 if the attack is critical. Again, a very, very good ability. Maneater's a really good champion outside of Clan Boss as well. Painkeeper needs to start off with combat tactics and then do the Spectacular Sweep. Spectacular Sweep is just to make sure that you don't ever skip that and then get the turn meter fill here by 10%. This is a problem. If you counterattack, that turn meter fill can disrupt this team. So that is why you cannot have counterattack stuff on Painkeeper, and that is why you need to make sure that this actually happens when it can happen. And finally, Seeker just does his thing. Honestly, I really recommend doing this to make sure that Seeker doesn't occasionally skip his Tailwind, but he will do his Tailwind properly most of the time anyway. Plus, he gives you the additional increase attack with this as well. So building attack-based damage dealers in this is great. You don't care if they're squishy because this is unkillable. You just want the boss to die. So this is the Bateater team. This is how you set it up. It's actually pretty simple, and it is 100% from the start. We could get out of a quick battle and do a very, very long run, but I've been able to 1-key from this. As you can see, we are Force, which is the worst affinity we can do with this particular team, because that is bad affinity for my Dracomorph, that is bad affinity for my Seeker. But this is going to be a 1-key. Again, my team is probably overbuilt for this, so we can simply start this, and this is why the 1-key is definitely very important. You can do this quick battle, and it's running. It doesn't really give you a turn countdown. Running in the background, Clan Boss went 50 turns. We did 92 million, almost 93 million. As you can see here, Dracomorph doing a ton of damage. Maneater's coming in with a ton of extra damage as well. Seeker doing a good amount of damage, and Painkeeper certainly bringing up the rear with the least amount of damage. So a lot of this for Painkeeper is actually this blessing, because this blessing means you're doing extra damage every hit. Same with Seeker there as well, although Seeker still hits very, very hard. And as you can see here, one of the Maneaters has the cruelty blessing, which downs the defense of the boss just a little bit. So that's just a nice extra bonus for doing damage. So that is a Bateater in a nutshell. So as I mentioned, that is the Bateater. I wanted to do another Clan Boss team build because you guys actually seem to like the other one. Now this is obviously not a takeover, but it's certainly nice to see how some of these unkillable teams are built, some of the things you have to go through when you are dealing with them. I didn't show you some of the tuning on the DeadwoodJedi calculator because, well, it has been done already, and I did do that in a previous video. I'll actually link to that video up above if you want to see a little bit more about how to do that. I should have a video on tools as well that's coming out soon. I don't know if it's going to come out before this or afterwards, but you can certainly check that as well. It does also talk a little bit about using the DeadwoodJedi calculator as well. So hopefully, you know, you've got a nice Clan Boss team going for you. Let me know what kind of Clan Boss team you are running down below. If there's any Clan Boss teams you would like to see me build, or if you've, you know, other content you'd certainly be interested in. I appreciate you guys letting me know what you want from me so I can make sure that I am helping you live your best raid life. So smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, make sure you're here for all the videos, all the notifications. I love you guys. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you much for all the support. And until the next video, I'm Bront CatHerder.